Shalom. We're up to Parshat Ekev, and there's a lot going on in Parshat Ekev. We're going to focus on a few points here. First of all, very, very famous pasuk, a mitzvah that we fulfill at least once a day. V'achalta v'savata v'erachta es Hashem Elokecha al haaretz hatovah asher natan lach. Right, that the mitzvah is that after we eat to the point that we feel full, the mitzvah v'erachta et Hashem Elokecha, the mitzvah of Birkat Hamazon. The Gemara in Brachos discusses the question. Well, that's beautiful. That's the source for the mitzvah to say Birkat Hamazon after eating. What about the mitzvah to say a bracha before we eat? The Gemara there goes into a very, very long search for some kind of scriptural source for the origins of this mitzvah of saying a bracha rishona, for saying a bracha before we eat. Fascinatingly, every single attempt the Gemara pursues seems to be a dead end, and in the end, the Gemara says svarahi. The source of the idea of saying a bracha rishona is pure logic. There is no single pasuk in the Torah that tells us you have to say a bracha before you eat. It's just so obvious that it's the halacha, without any need for psukim. What's the svara? What's the logic? The logic is asur lahanot me'olam hazeh bli bracha. Kol haneneh me'olam hazeh bli bracha ki'ilu gozo me'kadosh baruch hu. That this world is Hashem's, Lashem ha'aretz mloah, and anything that we benefit from without acknowledging where it comes from is a form of theft. And we know that theft is prohibited at a moral level. What the Gemara is saying fundamentally is that it is so obvious on a moral and natural spiritual level that before you benefit from the world that God created, you have to say in some way or another, you have to say thank you to Hashem for being the source of all goodness in the world. It's so obvious, it doesn't need a pasuk. Reality is, if you look at other religions, lahavdil, the reality is that basically every religion in the world has some form of thanking the Creator before benefiting from food. It's a natural, humanly obvious concept. It's interesting because Judaism is pretty much a religion of halacha. It's a religion of revealed law, that Hashem reveals halachos to us. How could it be that something fundamental like saying a bracha before we eat is there? It's a halacha, but it's a halacha that we just kind of know without any particular pasuk as the source. So I want to suggest that that's a question that's really at the root of another very, very important concept that shows up later on in the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu asks Am Yisrael, Vata, Yisrael, Ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mimach? What does God want of you? If you had to pin down in one sentence, what does God want of you? The answer is, Ki im virat Hashem Elokecha, to fear God, or to stand in awe of God, lalechet b'chol derachav, to walk in all of His paths. To walk in God's path. What does that mean? So Chazal say, on the one hand, there's a mitzvah of v'davakta bo, is a mitzvah to connect oneself to Hashem. On the other hand, we say in this week's parsha, we say ki esh ochlahi, that Hashem is a consuming fire. You can't connect yourself to infinity. The moment the finite connects itself to the infinite, it's burned up. We can't directly connect ourselves to God. So what does it mean v'davakta bo? So Chazal say the answer is v'halachta b'drachav, that we connect ourselves to Hashem not by physically connecting ourselves to Hashem, that's impossible, but by becoming as similar to Hashem as possible. We walk in God's footsteps. We become as like God as we possibly can. And how do we do that? So Chazal say, Mahu rachum afata tehe rachum. Mauchanun afatate chanun. Just as God is merciful, we strive to be merciful. Just as God is giving and gracious, so too we strive to be giving and gracious. The Rambam elevates this to a mitzvah d'oraita. There's a mitzvah d'oraita, ve'halachta b'drachav, emulating God, attaining a personality, a virtuous personality, as godly as possible. It's important to point out that Chazal say, Mahu rachum afatat tehe rachum. It doesn't say, just as Mahu gomel chasadim afatat tigmol chasadim. It doesn't say, just as God does merciful things, you should do merciful things. It says, just as God is merciful. It's not describing what he does, it's describing who Hashem is. You should develop a personality that parallels God's personality, so to speak. That a person shouldn't just strive to do the right actions, but should strive to have the personality that naturally gravitates to the right actions. There's a famous question: is it better to do a mitzvah when it's hard, when it's a struggle to get yourself to do the mitzvah? Or is it better to do the mitzvah when it feels totally natural and easy? The Rambam says that when it comes to moral mitzvot, to mitzvot that have to do with bein adam l'chavero, or to certain kinds of basic spiritual concepts that are obvious, self-evident, that of course a person should naturally strive to do the mitzvah. That there shouldn't be any inner resistance, because we cultivated a personality that naturally strives for that which is good and that which is right. The Maharal says that if a person gives tzedakah, and he doesn't really want to give tzedakah, he's doing it because it's a mitzvah. It says in the Shulchan Aruch, you have to give tzedakah, you have to give a certain amount of money to poor people, right? You're not allowed to close your hands to a poor person, so he does the right thing, even though he doesn't want to. According to the Maharal, that is a very low level of the performance of the mitzvah. Maharal's vision of the ideal act of tzedakah is that it should be done as if it's not a mitzvah. It should be done purely because you've reached a point where your personality is such a giving personality, so focused on justice and so focused on concern for the other that you have no choice. Of course you're going to give tzedakah. It's a poor person who needs your help. Of course you're going to help them. Not because God commanded you, because you've internalized God's personality to the point that you couldn't do anything but give tzedakah to the poor person. The Rambam says, Rabbi Wurzberger, one of my professors at Shabbat Shalom, he points out that the Rambam says that in Hilchos Tshuva, that a person has to do tshuva not just for sins we've done, not just for times that we've failed in terms of our behavior. A person has to do tshuva even for negative character traits. Let's say you have a negative character trait that doesn't get expressed in action. You have such a strong self-control that you're able to hold yourself back from acting on the negative character trait, but it's there. It's part of your personality. The Rambam says there's a mitzvah to do tshuva on that as well. Because part of the vision of Avodas Hashem is to cultivate an inner world, an internal reality, personality that is as close as possible to Hashem's personality. Mahu rachum afata tehe rachum. Ve'halachta b'drachav. We are where our thoughts are. Yiratzon, that we should step by step cultivate personalities that naturally bring us in the direction of constantly doing that which is right and that which is good in the eyes of God. Shabbos.